Really enjoyed doing this research. I find it fascinating. It's really fun sorting a conversation into categories and bring them all together into little brainstorms. And it's incredible how similar the journeys were, even of just a small group of people. And you can see those shared moments between them. I think it's important that people keep studying within this area. So the reason I went with self-identified woman was it was where I was at that point. I was self-identifying as neurodivergent. I think that self-diagnosis is important and valid. That there is such huge barriers to getting those full diagnoses in adults that we have to take self-diagnosis at face value. People don't go and say they're something unless they've got pretty strong convictions that they are. By giving people that space to be themselves, I think everyone is just happier, more comfortable. One of the big things that we found was this idea of a social script. An example of a social script is that after high school, you go on to university. After university or tech school, or you go on to find your partner. Once you've found your partner, you go on to have your kids. And then it stops. And a lot of the women talked about, and they used those few things. I think only one or two of them didn't use it. Where when they were lost, they went back to what was expected of me to be a normal human being. How am I supposed to act now? And then that's what you follow, is you follow that social script. But I think with the social script, what people do differently when they're neurodivergent is almost hold on to it more as rules, as in any other type of rule you would find. And it's not as flexible. You go, oh, this is the rule to life, this is what I must do. And so, which is fantastic in a way, because you've found a way to navigate things. But then it stops. And when that social script has stopped and those ideas have stopped, you sort of come to this like halt and you're not quite sure where to go to next. It comes down to when you look at life and you're trying to categorize life and how to follow through life, you need the rule. I keep coming back to rules because that's what it is. It's the rules to go by to win at life. And my best way to say that was one of the women talk about it as a bucket list. They had a bucket list and it was fantastic, and they ticked things off. They had, I'm going to have a baby at this age, I'm going to give eggs at this age, and they did. They went tick, 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 tick. And then they ran out, and what they didn't realise with that bucket list was you had to continuously add to it. And so I think that's the importance of that social script as well. A lot of people are going through that as a way to cling on to some rules to get through that transition time between sort of after high school to about 25, 30. And unfortunately that often ended with that dark period or burnout. And that's that loss of structure, I think. We also talk a bit about dark periods and burnouts And what I noticed was I think all 5 women I talked to said it was not depression. It's just that absolute physical exhaustion. You cannot keep going, you cannot keep thinking, but it's not depression. It does ping all the right things for depression, like if someone was asking you, but it's not quite the same. So dark period and burnout is quite similar, whereas a dark period would go on for probably longer. That's the difference between probably a dark period and burnout. They just talked about, they were the words that these women used, and it was talking about just the utter lack of their head working the way it should work. So normally they would find that their head would make these connections through a whole bunch of things really quickly, categorizing things and connecting the dots, and they always have done that. And then if a burnout or a dark depression hits, it just silences it all. Is that ongoing monologues, those connections, they just stop working properly. And I think that was the best explanation I had, was the things just slow down, they stop. One person talked about ending up in hospitalisation through it. It's hugely detrimental, but it's not depression. And the difference is not necessarily those dark thoughts going through. It's not, it could cause those dark thoughts and it could cause depression, but women we were talking to weren't talking about that dark period as being depressed. They were talking about it as that absolute lack of energy, that lack of things connecting. And I think that's the difference. And then I think I talked about the disconnection from the neurotypical world, just that feeling of ongoing difference that you feel. And I've got some cool quotes I might just throw in later about that. But just that, and the one I like is looking through a veil. You're just always slightly separated on a different sort of audio track. You're just slightly off kilter with everyone else. And once again, I'm going to go with a quote that I got from one of the participants. It was, relationships with people start normal and then the mask slips. They see the real me and they like me less. And I think that really says more than I can say. You go into things and you start off incredibly masked. You know the rule that you're going to be trying to follow, and you can do it quite proficiently. And then slowly you get comfortable with the people, and to them, you're changing. You're no longer that person they first met. But really what you're doing is you're becoming more comfortable and letting yourself come out. And so often when that happens, that's when people decide that we're no longer okay. We're no longer allowed to be accepted. And one of the ways that people deal with that is, another woman was saying, she deals with it by, she just flits through groups. She never stays with a group long enough to stay with friends. You never stay long enough to let them know the real you. And so eventually you stop going to those social things. The one that I have written in the article is the one about turning the sausages. That was quite a common idea, is that when you go to a social something, is you find a job to do. So that could be, I'm going to go take over the barbecue. I'm going to be the person behind the barbecue and I turn the sausages. And if someone talks to me, I can go, look, sorry, I have to go, the sausages need me, sort of thing. Another one is you go find the dog. A lot of them talked about going, it ends up being the toilet, but it's not about going being in the toilet. It's finding a space where you can just go, take a few breaths, go, I'm okay, I can do this. Having that quiet space, then coming back out. And the other one that was quite important was having a social leader with you. Be that a partner or a friend, but someone who can take the heat off you and make you feel less isolated and individual, but more as a group. And not going. There was always just not going. Yeah. And having friends that understood that sometimes the not going is where you're at. Talking, which is of course absolutely backwards, because a lot of people don't want to have those discussions, but a lot of autistic people do want to have discussions about important things, and that is an important thing, is how to join in, and not everyone. So I think I thought about this. Let's try and do that again. The first point I had written was, don't assume we're all the same. It's what will work for me is not going to work for the next person. And that's why it comes back to that talking, is figure out who you're with. And talking doesn't necessarily mean verbal. It might mean through email, texting. A lot of people text while they're in the same room. Just working out what they need. It's not something I can answer for people. I do think this is a good place to put in that. So what I'm doing now, I'm making sure that I'm using non-males, not females, because as we know, a huge portion of our autistic community don't identify on a gender binary. And it's for that research, I only had the 5 people, but I think it is really important that we remember that as a whole spectrum of gender and a whole spectrum of autism, and both of them are connecting together, and so everyone is so different. That's really just taking a person at face value. So special interests or passions are amazing when you're in the midst of it. It puts you into a state of, I've heard it be called flow before, and you can just sit there for hours. One person talked about sorting and selling Lego, and it's just calming and overtaking, and you can just sit there and a night will go by, and it allows the rest of the world to disappear. And I think that is why they're so important, is it gives a way to self-regulate, to be in your own head, to let the consistency of all the thoughts just be focused all in one place. And it's really amazing because everything else just disappears. And when that happens within your work, so another lady was talking about postcodes, and she worked with postcodes. And within this area she was working, she learned all the postcodes. It was in one of the bigger countries, right across the country. And one of the quotes I have in here say, what an absolutely useless skill, except for the job I was actually doing. But it works really well because it's fascinating and it takes your interest. And so when you can find a job that utilises that special interest and ends up taking some of that really good flow energy, huge amounts of work get done in different ways, and it's exciting. They can also be difficult, and I talked a bit about that before, when the special interest becomes all-engulfing and life keeps continuing around you and you can't pull yourself out of it to go to work or to go get the kids dinner or The things that have to happen, go have a shower, and instead you just want to spend hours and hours sorting your Pokemon cards or whatever it is that you're doing that's really important to you right in that moment, even though you know that it doesn't have to be done at some point in your head, you just can't pull yourself away from it. And I think that shows how the energy levels, it just really shows where the energy is. It was exciting. Chatting to the women, they were so easy to talk to. And they mentioned the same to me. And there's a thing I've learned about later. It's called the double empathy problem. And what it says is that while there is a gap between non-autistic and autistic people, it goes both ways. But often when you have autistic people talking to autistic people and you don't have to do all the sunshiny day stuff, and you can just talk about interests and talk about these excitement things, you just get on a roll and you start talking. And I found that with these women, and we had really exciting, deep conversations, and it was fantastic. So I really enjoyed the research. So for me, I'm looking at the diagnostic tools that we've currently got available. I feel like so much of our autism research have focused on, is it cisgender white males, particularly child diagnosis, and we have everyone else is just missing. And so that's where I'm going with my research, is I'm going into looking at how we can better support the diagnostic of adults, really, that are not male.